Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to look at how to create the initial workflow structure. Then in the next video, we will review the different options and settings for setting up the statuses and transitions. We are starting with a blank slate here. As you can see, we have no workflow defined. So what we can do is import a workflow template and build off of that. We have a few options to choose from. The basic workflow that is just open and closed. Next, we have the assignment workflow that is a bit more detailed with more statuses and transitions. For this example, we will start off with the basic workflow and build off of that. So let's select and import and get started. Now we have an open and closed status with a matching open and closed state. Under transition, we have close and reopen. Looking at it in this table view might not be the easiest to understand. So we can select the View Flowchart button and it will give us a nice visual of our workflow, making it easy to see the overall flow. Our form can transition from open to closed status or reopen from closed to open status. I want to point out that all forms start in an initial state. This allows us to open a form instance, start to fill it out, and then cancel if we need to before it enters the workflow. So even though we only have two states listed, open and closed, there's actually a third pre-state. This initialized settings is where we can define the initial state. We will look into these settings on the next video. In this video, we will concentrate on the creation of statuses and their transitions. Now let's build off this and add some more statuses. Then define how we want them to transition. To do that, we can select the Add Status button and create an assigned status. If this was our first status of the workflow, we would want to check the Use as Starting Status checkbox. In this case, we want the open status to be our starting status. And as you can see, there's a green circle with a check mark beside the open status, identifying it as the starting status. The next thing we'll want to do is set the state of our status. We have three options: draft, open, and closed. In this case, for the assigned status, we would want it to be in the open state. We will review the editable properties and visible to roles in the next video. Let's hit save, and now we can see an assigned status has been added and will be in the open state. Before we add any transitions, let's add a couple more statuses. Next, let's create a review status in the open state. Then create an approved in the closed state. And last, we can create a rejected status also in the closed state. For the closed status, I'm going to change the name to voided. Now, let's take a look at what we have. As you can see, we have our original two statuses that have transitions to each other, but the others are just floating without any transitions. So let's go and create some transitions and complete our workflow structure. Before we start adding transitions, we can move the statuses in the order we want them to flow. I will also point out that under Actions, we can copy an existing status. It gives us the option to include the transitions if we want and make adjustments to the other options. We can also delete statuses from the action column. Now let's start creating our transitions to complete this workflow structure. For our open status, we want it to transition to assigned. So let's hit this add button here and create this transition. We will call the transition assign and define the status transition from open to assigned. We will review these other transition button options on the next video. So now we have an assigned transition and a closed transition for the open status. Let's change the closed transition name to void. We will need to repeat these steps for the assigned status. Now let's add a review transition and let's create a transition to send it back to the open status. And we will do the same for the review status. We'll also want to link the review status to the rejected and void statuses. Let's also delete this reopen transition here. Now that we have all the required transitions, we need to make sure that they are in the proper hierarchy for each status. The top transition will be the default transition option on the form. For the open status, we want the default transition to be assigned. So let's move it above void. Now for the review status, we will have the approved transition as our default, but we will also have a drop-down list to pick from with these other 3 transitions if needed. Now we can select the View Flowchart button and see what we have. It looks like we have a pretty smooth, easy to follow workflow here. On the next video, we will review the other status and transition settings. Thank you for watching.